Good morning. This is Omni View, episode 26 for March 31st, 2026. Multiple perspectives, one briefing. Here's the news, the perspectives, and the questions worth asking. Let's begin with the latest developments in the Iran conflict, which continues to dominate global markets and diplomatic conversations. Oil prices reversed course and declined after reports that President Donald Trump has expressed willingness to conclude the military action against Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed to tanker traffic. This shift came after earlier volatility triggered by Iran's attack on a Kuwaiti oil tanker near Dubai, an incident that raised immediate concerns about potential oil spills and environmental damage in the Persian Gulf. The United States has carried out targeted strikes on Iranian facilities, including an ammunition depot, while Iranian forces have launched drone strikes on shipping and conducted operations across the region. Multiple nations are now assessing the broader implications for global energy supplies, with traders closely watching for any signs of a ceasefire or further escalation. What's interesting here is how quickly market sentiment can pivot from panic to cautious optimism based on signals from the White House, even as the physical risks to shipping lanes persist. Different news outlets have framed this story in distinct ways. CNBC and Bloomberg highlighted the price drop in response to a Wall Street Journal report detailing Trump's comments to aides, presenting it as a potential de-escalation signal that helped ease immediate fears about severe supply disruptions. In contrast, The Guardian has focused on the human and regional cost, detailing Iranian attacks on tankers, explosions in multiple cities, and describing the conflict as now entering its fifth week, a dangerous wave of strikes that threatens critical global energy routes and civilian infrastructure. The Daily Mail has emphasized the intensity of the military exchanges, noting the U.S. deployment of heavy bunker buster bombs and Iran's retaliatory drone strikes on commercial shipping. Bloomberg also drew a distinction between movements in Brent crude prices and the more complex disruptions to refined product markets, which often affect consumers more directly. While financial outlets appear primarily focused on trading reactions and the prospects for a negotiated pause, other organizations stress the humanitarian risks, environmental threats from damaged energy infrastructure, and the potential for long-term instability in the Middle East. The factual core, that Trump has signaled openness to ending hostilities despite the strait remaining contested, seems consistent across reports, but the interpretations diverge sharply depending on whether the emphasis is on market stability or strategic and human consequences. The question worth considering today: how might a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz affect global oil flows beyond the immediate price swings we see on trading screens? The answer could reshape energy policy for years to come. Shifting now from the Persian Gulf to developments within the British Broadcasting Corporation, where a prominent presenter has departed amid serious allegations. The BBC has confirmed that longtime Radio 2 host Scott Mills is no longer under contract with the corporation following allegations of serious sex offenses. Reports indicate the claims relate to events from around 2016 involving a teenage boy and are connected to Mills' earlier years presenting on Radio 1. The situation has reportedly created significant internal disruption at the BBC, raising fresh questions about oversight, historical conduct, and the corporation's handling of complaints involving high-profile talent. This comes at a time when the public broadcaster is already navigating broader challenges around trust, funding, and accountability in the digital age. Perspectives on this story vary in tone and focus. The Guardian reported the BBC's official statement that Mills has left following allegations concerning his personal conduct, placing the story within the larger context of the public broadcaster's ongoing difficulties in managing its public image and internal culture. The Daily Mail, by contrast, has provided more granular details about the nature of the claims, including descriptions of a historic relationship, and characterized the fallout as creating absolute chaos at the BBC, with implications for scheduling, morale, and public confidence. Both outlets agree on the central fact that Mills is no longer employed by the corporation, yet they differ in emphasis. One stresses the corporation's response and systemic issues, while the other highlights the severity of the allegations and the timeline involved. This divergence reflects familiar patterns in how different publications approach stories involving public institutions and personal misconduct. The question worth considering: what processes does a public broadcaster like the BBC follow when historic allegations surface against prominent presenters? The answer may reveal much about institutional accountability in an era when reputations can be made and unmade rapidly. Next, a notable development in a high-profile criminal case in the United States that has drawn significant attention from conservative circles. Attorneys for Tyler Robinson, the suspect charged in the assassination of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, have filed court documents asserting that the bullet recovered from Kirk does not match the rifle allegedly used by Robinson. This ballistic claim introduces fresh uncertainty into the forensic foundation of the prosecution's case and could become central in upcoming legal proceedings. The filing comes amid what has already been an emotionally charged and politically polarizing investigation. Coverage of this latest twist has been limited so far. The Daily Mail has reported on the defense team's argument regarding the apparent ballistic mismatch, presenting it as a potentially significant challenge to the government's evidence. Other major outlets included in today's briefing have not yet addressed this specific development, which means the full strength of the claim, any counter-analysis from prosecutors, or independent verification from court records remains uncertain at this stage. Ballistics matching is a highly technical field relying on microscopic markings, and disputes of this nature are not uncommon in complex cases, though their ultimate impact often depends on expert testimony and judicial rulings. The question worth considering: what forensic standards are used to match bullets to firearms in criminal cases, and how reliable are those methods when subjected to adversarial scrutiny? It's a reminder that even seemingly conclusive physical evidence can become contested ground. Meanwhile, new polling data offers some insight into domestic reactions to President Trump's handling of international crises. Surveys conducted by the Daily Mail and JL Partners indicate that President Donald Trump's approval numbers have risen from recent lows. This apparent rebound coincides with his reported efforts to secure a peace deal in the Iran conflict and his signaling of willingness to negotiate an end to active hostilities. The timing suggests that at least some portion of the public may be responding favorably to the perception of decisive, yet pragmatic leadership on the world stage. Perspectives on this polling shift are still emerging and somewhat narrow. The Daily Mail has directly linked the improvement in numbers to Trump's management of the Iran situation, framing it as evidence that his approach, combining military pressure with openness to de-escalation, is resonating with voters. Other outlets in our current briefing have not addressed Trump's approval ratings in this context, which makes it difficult to gauge how broad or durable this rebound might be across different polling firms and demographic groups. Public opinion during fast-moving international crises can be volatile, often swinging based on headline events rather than detailed policy outcomes. The question worth considering: how do polling organizations measure and interpret shifts in public sentiment during rapidly developing international crises? The methodology behind these snapshots can be as revealing as the numbers themselves. Turning to an international diplomatic ripple effect from the same conflict, Spain has taken a firmer stance by closing its airspace to American aircraft involved in operations against Iran. This decision goes beyond the country's earlier refusal to allow the use of jointly operated military bases on Spanish territory. The move comes several weeks after President Trump reportedly threatened to cut trade relations with Madrid over its lack of support. It represents another fracture in traditional transatlantic security cooperation at a moment when unity among allies is already under strain. Coverage has been relatively contained. The Daily Mail has framed Spain's decision as one that risks sparking a fresh diplomatic row with the Trump administration, potentially complicating broader NATO and economic relationships. No other sources in today's briefing provided specific coverage of this airspace closure, leaving questions about the full international reaction, the precise legal basis under international aviation agreements, and potential economic repercussions still unclear. Such decisions highlight the tension between national sovereignty and alliance obligations when conflicts arise. The question worth considering: what are the established diplomatic norms and legal frameworks regarding airspace access during Allied military operations? Spain's choice may test those boundaries in real time. To better understand much of the coverage surrounding the current Middle East crisis, it's worth stepping back to examine an element that most reporting tends to treat only superficially. Most stories portray the Strait of Hormuz simply as a stretch of water where ships happen to pass. In reality, these narrow maritime choke points serve as critical leverage points within a global energy system, where a relatively small number of routes carry the overwhelming majority of the world's traded oil and gas. The strait itself is a vital artery that cannot be easily replaced. Existing pipelines and alternative shipping paths have limited spare capacity, and any meaningful expansion would require years of infrastructure investment and diplomatic agreements. When conflict disrupts even the perception of safe passage, the consequences extend far beyond headline prices. Insurance premiums for tankers rise sharply, operators reroute or temporarily halt voyages, and the ripple effects often hit refined fuel markets, such as gasoline and diesel, faster and harder than they affect crude oil benchmarks. Different governments respond based on their individual levels of import dependence, available strategic reserves, and specific diplomatic relationships, rather than generic statements about energy security. Understanding this geography and economics helps listeners more critically evaluate competing claims about whether shipping lanes are truly open, the extent of actual supply impact, or the difference between short-term trading reactions and longer-term reconfiguration of global energy routes. Next time you encounter a headline about attacks near the Strait of Hormuz or dramatic oil price movements, it may be useful to consider what share of global supply physically moves through that corridor, who stands to benefit from heightened volatility versus restored stability, and whether the coverage clearly distinguishes between financial market swings and real-world changes in energy flows. Before we go, tomorrow we'll be watching for further updates on how import-dependent economies across Asia are managing the energy price pressures stemming from this ongoing conflict. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. This podcast is curated by Patrick, but generated using AI voice synthesis of my voice using ElevenLabs. The primary reason to do this is I unfortunately don't have the time to be consistent with generating all the content and wanted to focus on creating consistent and regular episodes for all the themes that I enjoy, and I hope others do as well.
Without taking the dive, we went on vacation. We had a nice time. My doomsday